During this series of 3 workshops, the company went from, oh my God, we have to respond or we will die, panic, to a very focused approach how they will adapt first the organization structure and processes and then implement the cutting-edge AI. I just read this amazing review article in the Journal of Management on how companies respond to discontinuous technologies. And I think it's super important for anyone who is interested in strategy and technological change. Because often we act as if there is a single playbook for dealing with disruption. Invest early, avoid complacency, experiment and scale, do some change management. But that pattern isn't actually true. The way the technology influences your organization is highly dependent on the context where you are. And whether or not specific actions are beneficial or harmful also depends on the context. And for the first time ever, this review took over 100 longitudinal qualitative studies of companies responding to technological disruption and analyzed how the context of each company differed from those of the others and how these contextual factors influenced whether the company succeeded in its adaptation or not. And what I really love in this paper is that it gives you a kind of framework for looking at your context, so then you can truly try to understand what kind of context you are dealing with and what might be the optimal approach in your situation. What is truly central in this review is that it identifies 3 main dimensions along which contexts differ. And the dimensions are the nature of the technology itself, so whether the technology is kind of modular or more architectural, that shapes how you should respond, as well as what is the state of change in the technology, if it's in the era of ferment or era of incremental change, meaning that there is a dominant platform already or multiple different platforms competing for dominance. And what you do as a company depends on the situation. The second dimension, the market, captures where and how the technology is coming into the markets. So whether it's coming from within the markets, is it one of your competitors who creates the discontinuous technology, or outside the industry, so that a completely different company creates a technology that shapes your industry. And this matters a lot, because if it's coming from a close competitor, you're likely to see it earlier and respond more aggressively. Whereas if it's coming from somewhere far away, you're more likely to ignore it. And that matters in your sense making, so you should map this differently. The second element in the market category is whether it starts from the low end, low price points, and incrementally creeps upward, or whether it comes as a high-end solution and might incrementally go lower at the cost level. And this again shapes how your customers and your management team will understand the new technology and what are your natural tendencies to react. And that leads to the third dimension of the framework, which is the organization and institutions. This dimension covers the cognitive affective elements of radical change. So how do you as top management team understand the new technology? How do you identify with the old technology? What is the identity of your organization? These shape how you perceive the technology and what you will do. In addition, in this dimension, it matters a lot whether you perceive that you are an actor who can shape the context or just an object who receives the change and has to adapt. And in together, these 3 dimensions, the technology itself, the market, and the organization and institution, they are the context in which this discontinuous technological shift happens. So all in all, if you want to understand how you should update your strategy when there is a new technology in your industry. You should look at these three different dimensions, their sub-dimensions, and truly understand the nature of the technology and its context, because that context determines what approach will be successful and what approaches will fail. And the cognitive affective dimensions is really relevant because technological disruption challenges many of the underlying assumptions and routines and tools that organizations have. So if you are facing a discontinuous technology today, don't just apply the basic formula of success with technology, but really think, what is this context about? And actively make sense what is best approach for dealing with the change and growth in your context. And I especially want to highlight the cognitive affective dimension because the review, it covered 127 qualitative studies on multiple organizations. But one reason I love it is because it cites my own work on emotions and disruption a lot. And my research shows that when there is a technological disruption, especially when the change comes from outside the industry, like Apple entered the mobile phone industry, and from the high end, it creates a lot of negative emotions in top management team and kind of denial that no outsider can beat us in our own game. And that denial and negative emotion can activate a kind of rigid response and failure to adapt optimally and failure to be open-minded and learn. And coupled with performance pressure and other things, it can paralyze your organization. For example, with one organization that I'm currently working on, we ran a series of 3 workshops which were optimized around the emotional dynamics in strategy formulation. And during this series of 3 workshops, the company went from, oh my God, we have to respond or we will die, panic, to a very focused approach how they will adapt first the organization structure and processes and then implement the cutting edge AI a bit later. So they chose a wiser, more focused approach which was more realistic in terms of its resourcing and more likely to produce high impact. And how this happened was that we intentionally first just mapped the potential implications of the technology and different scenarios and kind of savored even the kind of horror stories that could happen and how the organizations could get destroyed. But we did it in a kind of structured and a bit humorous way, so there was joy in pain. But that opened up the thinking and inspired then a lot of option generation, and we focused on the opportunities in the second process. So the second part could focus on option generation without anyone feeling the need to bring up the potential threats, because we had mulled over the threats already a lot. And because everyone knew that the third workshop would focus on critical analysis. So there was this space for option imagination in the second workshop. And in the third workshop, then we took a more analytical approach and structured the solution in a meaningful way. And in this way, we had a formal structure in a series of workshops that intentionally had different emotions for each workshop. First one was kind of about horror, second one was joy and fun, and the third one was critical, analytical, confident. And this is how I believe that you can get the best strategic thinking. Emotions are underlying the process, and then the content is the king. So my kind of creative synthesis from the review article, An Emotional Dimension, is that you should take your senior management team, sit down, look at the dimensions of the article, and map the ongoing technological shifts along each dimension and really kind of understand what is likely to happen and what therefore might be the best way for you to react. You need to create a structure and process in which you can kind of calmly go through the different dimensions of the framework and analyze what kind of a context do you have with the ongoing technological disruption. And when you calmly look at each dimension, consider the associated emotions, focus your attention on the relevant details, you come up with ideas what will be the best way to lead this change and grow in the disruption. And you do this cognitively, but you need emotion management to enable it. And when a new technology suddenly makes many of the things that you know and have irrelevant, that feels threatening and creates a strong stress reaction in the senior management team, in the board of directors, and in the organization more broadly. And this stress reaction in itself harms thinking. And you can manage those emotions partly by designing structured processes that guide people's attention to information in a way that it becomes easier to absorb and less threatening in an interpersonal sense. So you focus on the long-term implications, you focus on multiple options, you focus on what you can do. And when your processes combine these kind of positive elements and positive attention in the face of disruption, the different parts of the organization give useful ideas, and the senior management team can formulate a more comprehensive understanding of the situation. And then when you have this a bit more comprehensive understanding of the situation as a senior management team, you can again feel more confident about investigating the nuance of the situation, and you learn again more, which gives you more confidence. And this way you ultimately end up making the best possible choices. And when you do this confident but humble work of understanding the context, supported by structured processes that help in emotion management, the whole organization becomes more convinced that the new direction that you are choosing is going to be a successful one. And hence, emotion management becomes a kind of central foundation of good quality understanding during technological disruption, and this understanding is necessary for optimal decision making. So emotions help you understand, which helps you to make better decisions and take more energetic actions.